Sup, nerds? I'm still under the weather, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging when it came to the Percy Jackson of it all. So instead of doing what I originally had planned, I've decided that what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our first ever episode, which was me looking at adaptations in general, but mainly Percy Jackson Season 1, and seeing if I still have the same opinions on the show following the conclusion of Season 2. If not, what's changed? Did they improve? Have some parts let me down that didn't before? Or where am I at, really? So it's going to be some sort of a pseudo review rather than what I originally had planned, which was going to be a full review. It's just going to be me looking at my old opinions and seeing if they match up with where my head's at now following the conclusion of Season 2, The Sea of Monsters. So buckle up, this should be fun. Okay, let's actually go and listen to what Past Me had to go and say about Season 1, and let's see if we actually agree or disagree with what Past Me said. I remember some vague things, but let's have a look at what I actually said in the past. Yeah, I think they kind of blew their god load, so to speak, as well. Like, I get we had to meet, obviously, Echidna, technically a god, goddess. We had to meet Poseidon, we had to meet Zeus, and we had to meet Ares. Those gods and slash goddesses are mentioned in the first book.
Yeah.
But Hermes, it doesn't show up in person until the second book, and we definitely don't meet Hephaestus yet. Also, I think it was very fast paced. I understand it in the first episode to a degree, because in the first episode, I'm seeing it as we're looking through the eyes of a kid with ADHD. So of course, everything happens a lot faster than we're used to because people with ADHD process things. Well, tend to process things a lot faster. The fights were a bit too quick for me. I would have liked a little bit of a drawn out fight, especially the final fight. For those of you that haven't seen the show, spoilers, with Ares. In the book, that's one of the best scenes. Like, the police get involved.
It feels
they
like they put it
see
down.
there's guns, there's explosions. The Furies, sorry, not harpies, are watching from the sidelines. Percy actually holds his own with his sword.
It feels like they cut it down a lot.
Yeah, he does end up summoning a tidal wave to kick his ass, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I read the Lightning Feast. But, there's actually a drawn-out fight to begin with. Beyond that, I think it was a good adaptation. I don't expect it to be one-to-one. For those of you that did expect it to be one-to-one, I understand why you're disappointed. So it looks like Past Me had some colourful choice words to say about the gods appearing in the first series and how there were too many appearing. And I do stand by that. In the first series, there was too many gods shown. Thankfully, I will agree that the second series did tone down the appearance of gods. I believe we only got the necessary god appearances. Did Athena appear technically in the second series? Yes. However, wasn't actually Athena. It was a illusion told by Annabeth. And while it's not the illusion we get in the books, which does feature Athena, because that one also features her father and Luke as well, if my memory is serving me. I read the book recently, but it's a bit fuzzy in my head, the specifics of the vision, but I'm pretty sure it was a picnic and it had Annabeth, Luke, her mother and father. And anyway, with that, I do like that they changed it to Athena saving Annabeth. It kind of flips on its head like a coin, the opposite of what happened in the first series, where Athena was directly responsible for putting Annabeth and Percy and Grover in danger with Echidna. So this time it was Athena saving Annabeth, and that being her deepest desire to have made her mum proud and for her mum to save her. be there to save her, kind of like what Thalia did. It's giving Thalia this motherly place in Annabeth's life, meaning that Thalia fits the role that she wishes Athena would fill, which kind of gives Luke this older brother place instead of romantic place, which I think fits a lot better, seeing as though they are heavily pushing the Percebeth of it all throughout the second series. Like, there is a scene in Circe's spa where Percy, after being confronted by his fatal flaw, doesn't say that he would let Olympus burn. He says he would burn it down, and if that is not romantic tension between Percy and Annabeth, I can walk in a straight line out of my wheelchair, and let me tell you, that is something that will not happen. So, yeah. Um, I, I have nothing more to say on the fact that I think adding Athena was a decent shout there. The Zeus twist, that changes something in Thalia's story, which I can't really speak to until we see season 3, which thankfully we're not going to have to wait long. We are getting season 3 this year. So thankfully we're not going to have to wait too long to see the ramifications of that. I do feel like that's changing Thalia's role slightly. Yes, there was always some antagonistic behavior between Percy and his older cousin Thalia. However, this is different because we know that Poseidon is a caring father, whereas Zeus clearly isn't. And we know that anyway from the books. Like, we see the way that he treats the Graces. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't read The Heroes of Olympus. There are more than one. There is Thalia and there is her younger brother Jason, who is actually the son of Jupiter, not Zeus, because the Greek gods have like a split personality with their Roman counterparts. But they are siblings twice over through Zeus and his split personality, and they share the same mother. So if we ever get to Heroes of Olympus show-wise, that'll be a fun dynamic to explore because, yeah, that's really fun to do. But Zeus actually kind of stuck around the Graces a little bit until he realized Thalia was a problem or could be a problem. And then he just left and gave Jason over to Juno as her champion. So that's kind of why Heroes of Olympus kicks off, because Hera or Juno or both working in tandem technically kick off the prophecy of the seven. So yeah, so that's that. But Zeus, the change there, it does also have a fundamental change for Annabeth as well. So Zeus showing up and doing what he does to Thalia, imprisoning her in the tree, which shout out to the actor that had to step into Lance Frederick's shoes. I think you did a phenomenal job with the limited scene that you got playing Zeus and stepping in to Lance Frederick's shoes. I know, again, that was also just a limited scene. We don't really get much of Zeus throughout the book series. Like, he gets limited appearances here and there, but even so, you had to pick up from a great actor, and you've done a fantastic job. And I do think that scene was very chilling between yourself and Thalia. So shout out to you. But the change it makes is actually more in Annabeth's character, as if it was the Furies and Zeus that led to Thalia's fall, then Annabeth's distrust of Tyson switches from a distrust and anger over the death of her maternal figure to a somewhat jealous friendship angst. I know they tried to give her some reason to dislike Tyson by having the Cyclopes be the one that kidnapped her, which is the reason Thalia took them to Camp Half-Blood in the first place. Well, agreed to let Grover take them to Camp Half-Blood in the first place. But I don't think that that works because the only reason she's upset about all of the thing about going to Camp Half-Blood is she blames herself because if she hadn't have gone back for the little plastic amulet, then they would never have been in danger. So, which foreshadowing, I hope no one else goes back for a little plastic trinket and almost gets themselves killed, or maybe gets themselves killed. Um, Not naming any names. But you'll have to wait and see. But yeah, so I do feel like they kind of set it up, but then they kind of swung and missed by having Annabeth blame herself for that, and then having Thalia not even die because of the Cyclopes. It kind of changes Annabeth's mood towards Tyson from being this character arc where she has to overcome her distrust of Tyson and realize that, like, yes, Cyclopes were the reason for the death of Thalia, but Tyson wasn't one of those Cyclopes. To Annabeth struggling to share Percy's attention. And while it is a different character arc, it's not a bad one when you look at Annabeth's home life. It's just, it didn't, it doesn't look like that's what they were trying to set up. So it comes across different and more of a jealousy plot line. If they were going for it the way that I feel like they were going for it, then I think they should have set it up better. And the way they would have set it up could have knocked it out of the park, so to speak. And it could have gone more into Annabeth's like feelings of abandonment and loneliness because of how her home life was and how she felt at home and the reason she ran away as a child and the fact that she never really had a safe space outside of Thalia and Luke. Then Luke's abandoned her, so now she feels like Percy's doing the same by choosing Tyson. They could have balanced that if they weren't going the original way with the Tyson plotline. And like I said, in my opinion, I feel like the changing in Thalia's story deviated a lot from the reason why Annabeth doesn't like Tyson. Um, but then again, they don't hammer it home that Annabeth doesn't like Tyson. So what do I know? Maybe they just decided to go away with that. It's just in the first couple of episodes I noticed that they kept that angst in, like when she first meets him and like when they're in camp together, the angst is still there and it's never really explained. Even Grover's line about how does Annabeth feel about that doesn't really make sense with the revelations we get. That's just my 2 pence. Let me know in the comments if you guys think that I'm totally missing something here or whether you agree with me, because it's just something that I noticed on a rewatch. But yeah, as for my other complaints, because I do think that the God stuff kind of balanced itself out, and I think introducing Hermes last season was actually a good thing. It led to one of the funniest moments this season because having Hermes be in the Lotus Casino last season actually meant that we got some really cool moments this season with Hermes where he either agreed to being the god's man whore, which we all know is Zeus, or he just called out every single one of his brothers and sisters and father because he said that half of the kids in Hermes' cabin are come from nights in Vegas. So, and for those of you that don't remember or haven't read the books or haven't watched season 1 in a while, yes, Hermes' cabin is where his children go, but Hermes' cabin is also where the unclaimed kids go. So either he's calling himself out and saying, yeah, I have a lot of wild nights in Vegas, or he's saying, yep, that's where all the unclaimed kids come from. Take it as you will, but that is funny. And we wouldn't have got that interaction had Hermes not been in season 1. So that one I can get behind. I think it set this up, this interaction between Hermes and Percy really well, and kind of gives them this backwards and forwards banter and sets their dynamic up really well. The one I still don't quite understand why he was in season 1, especially seeing as though he hasn't played a part in this season at all, is Hephaestus, but maybe time will tell. I don't really know where they're going to go with it, but hey, maybe it's some sort of setup for Heroes of Olympus, because I know one of his kids is very important for that, but hey ho. Or maybe it's a setup for later on, without spoilers, towards the end of the series. Again, I don't know what they're doing there, but it is a really weird throw in to have Hephaestus show up in season 1. I'll still stick by that, but I do think that they balanced out the gods a lot better this time. And yet, like I said, they added Zeus in and they added Athena in this time. However, Athena was in the book. She just didn't play that much of an active thing outside of being sat on a blanket, and she and Zeus wasn't in this at all. So, but I think the twist does add something for Thalia, while, as I've explained, taking away something from Annabeth. However, it does give Annabeth this new avenue that they could explore, I think. But yeah, as for pacing, which was one of my other complaints, I do think that they're stuck with the same pacing. I think this is something that we're stuck with now. I think that we're stuck with the Disney Plus pacing, I'm going to call it, because it is very quick. We are jumping from plot beat to plot beat to plot beat, and there are things that do get left out. There are cuts on the cutting room floor that don't really need to be there at all. Um, there are things that happen that are weird. Like, in the book, we do not go back to the Princess Andromeda. Now, I understand why they've done that. I think that does add something, and specifically to Clarice. Now, this is something I was thinking while watching the episode, and it's a thought I've had since. In the scene where she has to choose between Charybdis and Scylla, she originally chooses to go through and sacrifice her men, only to immediately regret it and go with what Ares would go with, falling back on what I would call trauma because of the way that Ares is with his kids. And so she has to go for the glory because that's what Ares wants, and Ares gets what Ares wants. We see the way that Ares is with her, and what he says something bad will happen to her if she fails. And she's already had that prophecy that she will fail. Now, she misinterprets what it means, as prophecies are led to do, but she's scared and she goes with the option that she's been told her entire life by her father to go for, and that costs them. That costs her deeply, because she promised those men Elysium, something she shouldn't be able to promise and can't promise, and Annabeth and Percy point out to her, you can't promise that, you are not a god. But she promised it anyway, and she jumped at the Ares option when she felt fear. And that's what blew up in her face. Then we get back to the Princess Andromeda, and this is where I brought this back up. Why I brought this up. because there's a moment that's similar in my mind, and it's the moment Clarice overheard the two individuals talking about going to and Allison going to kill Annabeth, and she has the option. She has the Ares option, going for the fleece and claiming glory, or she has the Clarice option, going to save one of her friends. And it's the Clarice option, going to save one of her friends, that helps her complete her quest, because she would fail in the end without friends. Yes, she has to fly home alone, as Percy points out at the end of the show. Like, the friends help her fly home alone. But it's without the friends that she would fail. And it's the fact that Clarice chooses friends, which is not the choice Ares would make. Ares would have chosen the glory option and gone for the fleece, that allows Clarice to complete her quest. And that is a full circle moment. So that's why I don't think going back to the Princess Andromeda was a waste. However, when we're talking about pacing, which is what my original point was, I think that the rest of it was very fast paced, so that could be quite easily missed. I'm not saying that, like, I'm some savant or anything. I'm not. It's just I've had a lot of time to rewatch the show because I've not been feeling very well. Because I've done that, it's something I've picked up on like the fourth watch of the show, that Clarice kind of had a mirrored moment. It's not something I picked up on my first watch at all. And that is because of the pacing. Because we go past that scene so quickly that it's so hard to miss. Same for, so easy to miss. I mean, same for with Luke and Percy. So when Percy escapes with the fleece, if Clarice had gone for the fleece, she would have died, in my opinion, and that's why she would have failed. The only reason Percy was able to escape with the fleece, despite being wounded, is because up until just before the final battle at Valia's Tree, Luke wasn't trying to kill Percy. Yeah, he lashed out, but he knew he had the fleece. The thing is, Kronos only gave the order to kill Percy just before the final battle at Thalia's Tree. Which means, up until that point, Percy wasn't fair game at all. After that point, Percy was fair game. The only person that doesn't seem to be on the level is Allison. And I don't really understand the inclusion of Allison. So for anyone that's not in the know, Allison is a show-only character. She doesn't exist in the books. She was created for the show. I thought she was a nice inclusion instead of doing Polyphemus to chase Grover. It kind of sets Polyphemus up as a bit of a surprise for those that haven't read the books or anything like that. But beyond that point, I don't really understand her inclusion. It makes Luke seem less in charge of his own men and diminishes his own space, in my opinion. Allison just seems to be in charge while Luke is there. I don't really understand her inclusion. I'm not going to question the writers or Rick Riordan. Like, they're the ones that created this character. They're the ones that put her in the show. They've obviously got a purpose for her, but as of season 2, I don't understand her inclusion unless it's to give Annabeth her own rival, because she seems to have a massive hate worm for Annabeth, and I don't understand it either. She's confusing to me. That's all I can really say about Alison Sims. I don't get why she's there. Um, but yeah, I do think that the pacing is the same. I do think that it is jumping a lot through a lot of things. The Polyphemus thing in the books was 3 chapters, and in the in the show, it was one episode, and he wasn't even really. They set him up to be smarter, and I don't even think he was that big of a threat for Percy and Annabeth. Yeah, he did some damage to Annabeth, and Luke managed to get away with Annabeth, but again, like I said, Luke wasn't even there. Clarice threw Annabeth over her shoulder and firemen lifted her away in the book. Like, we don't get any of that in the book. So there is no Luke of it all. Annabeth is still wounded, but not to that extent in the book as well. I think we should have got a bit more with Polyphemus. I understand that they're trying to build Luke up to be the big bad, but I do think that there needs to be a bit more on the antagonists for each book. I'm not saying that it should have been like 2 episodes or anything, but I do think if it had been a longer episode and we'd have got a little bit more with Polyphemus, then that would have been better. Maybe we might get a bit more of Luke taking a bit of a back seat next season with Atlas, because I do think Atlas kind of takes over in Titan's Curse. With that, I think the only other thing that I really did criticize in that opening bit was the fight scenes, and I do think that these were way better than last season. I think the fight scenes were way more drawn out, way more choreographed, way better in every sense of the word. The scene where we see Alison and Annabeth and Percy go toe to toe was fantastic. I do like how Percy didn't just like mollywop Alison. Yes, Percy is technically on his home turf because he's on a boat at sea. However, Percy is still inexperienced compared to a graduate of Camp Half-Blood. Like, that is how Alison is introduced to us. So, she has the experience to be able to take on a 1-year camper. Like, that's what we've got to think about at this point. In book 2, Percy is on his 2nd year of camp, and he hasn't really done much training. Because thinking about Book Percy and Show Percy, they are different. Book Percy had training from Luke before he went on his first camp excursion in the Lightning Thief. And then he did a bunch of stuff before he went on the Sea of Monsters whole thing in book 2. Then this Percy barely had any training from Luke before he went on his quest in the Lightning Thief season, and barely did anything in the Sea of Monsters season before he left camp of his own fruition to go and rescue Grover. So the fact that he's been able to hold his own with graduates of Camp Half-Blood is astonishing. It's not that he's been nerfed, it's that this version of Percy Jackson doesn't have the same training as Book Percy did. Like, we see a training arc in book 1 for Percy. We see Luke training him with the sword and things like that, and no sword fitting in Percy's hand like Riptide. But we haven't seen that in the show. We also haven't heard Riptide named Riptide yet, or Anaklusmos, which I probably mispronounced, or Anaklusmos, but I probably mispronounced it there as well. I really hope it's Atlas that names it next season, or his daughter, because I want Percy to be like, whip it out to save someone or do something, and either she sees it or Atlas sees it in their fight, and they go, name the sword and be like, that was mine, boy, but long before it was yours, because canonically, Riptide belonged to Atlas before it was Percy's. So that would be a nice like callback to that, as well as a nice way to have the name dropped in show, as it's not actually been done yet. It also would have Percy like finally learn that swords have names, because like I said, Riptide hasn't been named, but neither has Backbiter, which is the name of Luke's sword. So that will be interesting to learn when we find out what that when it's name dropped to that as well. But back to what I was saying about the fights, I do think that they were well way better choreographed, especially the scenes between Luke and Percy. Like Luke and Percy being able to hold their own with each other, but Luke slightly having the edge because Luke is the better swordsman. Like even though Percy gets better at swordsmanship, Luke is the better swordsman. And towards the end of the book series, like by the last Olympian, the only person that can challenge Luke in swordsmanship is Percy, and the only person that can challenge Percy in swordsmanship is Luke. So until Percy meets Jason, no one can really challenge Percy at swordsmanship, which means his skills don't really get any sharper up until Heroes of Olympus. And then you get the whole fight on the battlefield where Percy cuts through multiple demigods until he gets to Luke. He pulls off a move Luke used on him twice, and unbeknownst to Percy, Luke has the green light to kill him, so he gets his face bashed in like it's an MMA fight, and Percy is the loser. And poor Percy was not expecting that. This is what I mean about the fight scenes being a lot better. This is what the fight should have been like last season, where Ares was going up against a 12-year-old. Like, yes, Percy won against Ares, and he does win in the book, so he should win. But the fight scene should have been like legitimate. We should have actually seen blow for blow a fight, not just Percy summoning a tidal wave to knock Ares on his butt. Like, I get that, like, that was cool, see it a cool thing, but did he really win if he's just using his aqua powers? I wouldn't really call it a win that way. The only other thing that I remember talking about, though I couldn't find it in the audio, which is why it wasn't included in that bit, is the fact that Percy knew too much in the first season. Like, his mythological knowledge was Annabeth levels, and he was able to get to the point a lot quicker than in the books, like with Anti-M and things like that. And for the most part, I think season 2 did that a lot better. I really do. I think Annabeth having to fill Percy in on a lot of stuff was handled really well, but it wasn't overly done. Like they knew pretty quickly that they were at Cersei's spa, because she was called Cece. She was calling herself Cece, and then she used magic, and she said she was a sorceress. So Annabeth went, Cece, sorceress, you're Cersei, and then kept talking about Homer, which was pissing off Cersei, which I did like. The sirens, I thought that was done really well. Like, there were things that they could have done where they would have just had the answers. Like, give it, like, I think the best example is last season, they walked up to Auntie M and they automatically knew she was Medusa. Percy arrives at camp this season and Tantalus is stood there. Now, he says his name, and Percy knows who he is because he's done mythology, but it's not that like he immediately knows who he is. He's like you can see him take a minute to think. And when he comes out and says it, it's like someone that's thought about it. It feels organic. It doesn't feel like he just knew who this person was, like he was reading from the book. Whereas last season, it felt like, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense or if I'm rambling at this point, but last season, it did feel like they were reading from the book. This season, it feels like they know things because they know them, not because they're reading from the book. Also, changing things up from the book so that what they're expecting isn't what they're getting. So they're expecting Polyphemus to be a dumb, blind Cyclops. And that's what we kind of get in the book. It's also what we get in Epic the Musical, apart from the fact that he's blind, like he gets blinded in Epic the Musical. But he is pretty dumb. In the Percy Jackson season 2, yes, he's partially sighted because of what Odysseus did. But he's not dumb. He's actually kind of intelligent. And that subversion means that what they were expecting isn't what they got. The same with Cersei. What they were expecting isn't what they got. The same with a bunch of things that happened. I feel like this was done really, really well. Tyson was done really, really well in this season. And I think the way that he plays his part in this season was done really well. The scene right at the end where he tells Percy that he prayed for a friend and was given a brother was so emotionally sweet, and added to by the fact that they haven't just been brothers for like a few weeks, because Sally has been raising them side by side for a year since she found him at the homeless shelter. Therefore, they've been friends, but kind of living together as like brothers for a year. So he was, in a sense, given a brother before they even knew they were brothers. And on that note, showing us that Sally Jackson is clear-sighted in season 2 was so great. It makes it so much better that we don't have to just get exposition dump by the last Olympian, where all these monsters are working with Kronos and Luke and everything, and Sally Jackson can see them and is just not oblivious, and then you have to be told, oh yeah, she's clear-sighted. Like, it's so much better that we've had this. Like, yeah, she knows, she can see. Cool. We know. We know now. Sally Jackson is clear-sighted. Awesome. I think for my complaints of last season, I think this season has done a lot better. Were the things that I think this season could have done better? Yes, there are things I think this season could have done better. 100%. I think there are things that definitely should have been explored better. This season has been good overall. So thank you for listening to me ramble, and I'll probably do this again next year after season 3 to see if I still agree with my points now. Let me know if you've liked this video down below. If you have, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date for when we drop new content. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and most of all, stay nerdy. I will see you in the next one.